I'm literally gonna need a drink to get through this one. A few weeks ago, I released the first video on this channel, an in-depth breakdown into the 2002 Scorpion King movie starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in his first ever role as a leading man. As I talked about back then, The Scorpion King was one of my favourite movies as a child. The Scorpion King 2, however, was probably my least favourite movie as a child. I've always wondered if the movie was really that bad, or if it just didn't live up to the lofty heights of the original in little Brad's mind. And so that's why I've decided that I wanted to revisit the franchise as an adult and see if 1, the first movie held up, and 2, if the second movie is as bad as I remember. What do we really know about The Scorpion King 2: Rise of a Warrior? Honestly, fuck all. Nobody seems to give two shits about this movie. People give so few shits that on the Wikipedia page for this film, one of the characters' names is spelt wrong the entire synopsis. Aside from a few behind-the-scenes featurettes on the DVD, and a few sporadic interviews here and there, there's not really much information about why. Just why. Why do you exist? But this is what I did manage to find out. After the box office success of the first film, there was a lot of buzz about doing a sequel, and a few years later, they announced they were going to do a sequel, but the franchise is going to be carrying on without The Rock, the leading man. And I have to imagine that they didn't want to try and recast The Rock at this point, because he's The Rock. So they decided that they would instead do a prequel. That makes this movie a prequel to a prequel to a sequel to a remake. So you already know it's going to be good quality stuff. The Scorpion King 2: Rise of a Warrior. It is a warrior, not the warrior, isn't it? Yeah. The Scorpion King 2: Rise of a Warrior did not have a very big budget, it had very limited shooting time, and it was also going straight to DVD. So there's so many examples of corners being cut, of bad editing, of just things looking shit. But that's not necessarily a deal breaker. Great writing and a great story has the power to save poor visuals. But if the story's shit and the writing's shit, then those poor visuals become a lot more noticeable. Have a guess which category this one falls into. I can already tell from my notes that this video is going to be long. So in order to make the viewing experience a bit cleaner for everybody, what I've done is I've broken up the film, as I'm going to be talking about it, into chapters, so people can watch a chapter at a time rather than watching the entire thing, which is probably going to be more than 2 hours. Right, well, I think I've stalled enough, so put away your shrimp and your eggnog. Let's do this. The opening narration explains the origins of Akkad, which is where the Akkadians come from. I actually really like this silhouette style. It's a cheap way of creating a large battle scene. Hey, look at that, we're opening with a compliment. It's all downhill from here. Here we're told that the most elite of all of Akkad's warriors are called the Black Scorpions. And it's here I remembered one of the things that I hated the most about this movie. Everything is Scorpion related. In the original movie, they gave him the moniker the Scorpion King because he survived Scorpionism and then he became a king. But clearly the writers of this movie weren't creative enough to come up with something of their own, so they just thought, oh, well, Scorpion's in the name, I guess we'll just put Scorpion into everything. I already know that I'm going to have a rough time going through this, so I've decided every time there is a mention of a Scorpion-based thing, we're going to do a shot. So if you want to join me at home, shot. Oh, God. I didn't prepare myself. The Black Scorpions are extremely loyal, so they are prized as bodyguards. Now I know what you're thinking, didn't the first film establish that Akkadians were known as being assassins? Protecting people, killing people, is literally the opposite thing. The best of these Scorpions is a man named Asher, and he is the father of Matthias, our protagonist who grows up to become the future Scorpion King. Matthias wants to grow up just like his dad, but Asher is very much against this. He's committed a lot of horrible acts in the name of his kingdom, and he doesn't want his son to grow up to be just like him. It sounds like the movie is setting up a very interesting theme here. This regretful father who wants his son to do better, to be better, to not grow up to be a monster. The idea that there is a very fine line in war between being a hero and being the villain. I'm really hammering this home because I don't want you to forget it like the movie does for the first hour of its runtime. Despite his father's plea, Matthias goes behind his back and signs up to become a Black Scorpion. We are now swept away to the training grounds, where the new Scorpion recruits are lining up to prove their mettle. The establishing shot for this scene has the arena surrounded by seating with the city in the background. In the very next shot, half the wall is missing. Good start! This is our first introduction to the antagonist of the movie, Sargon, and he is portrayed by the legendary UFC fighter Randy Couture. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, I forgot to look it up. Here we encounter one of the biggest issues that this movie has. His acting is fucking abysmal. He's supposed to be this force for evil, but his delivery somehow makes the most dangerous man in the world come across as completely unthreatening. It reminds me of an NPC in an Elder Scrolls game.
You look familiar. Do I know you? Arm yourself. I have special plans for this one.
Sargon is holding trials to see who is worthy to become the next generation of Black Scorpions, or as he puts it,
You 24 boys are here to show your skills in the art of fighting.
The idea here is that 24 young boys are going to duke it out, but only 12 of them get to advance to the next level of training. This scrap that you're watching now is the biggest fight scene in the whole movie. I wish I was joking. In the midst of the fighting, Matthias ends up dueling with his childhood friend Layla, and they both reveal to each other that they shouldn't be there, obviously for different reasons. So, can anyone just turn up and have a go? Like, does no one check who these people are? In this crowd full of 24 boys, Sargon somehow spots the girl, despite the fact that her face is covered and she fights just as well as the boys. After Sargon starts manhandling Layla, Matthias assaults him and gets arrested by the guards. Out of nowhere, Matthias' dad turns up, throws a spear at Sargon's feet, and then starts threatening him. Would it not have been easier and far less problematic to just say something? Just use your words, Asher. Technically, Sargon's in the right here. Matthias attacked him, and Layla, by the rules, is not allowed to compete. Like, Sargon at this point hasn't done anything wrong. But no, Asher steps in, insults Sargon, and then starts to walk away without the son that he came here for. Sargon goes in for a surprise attack, and it might have just worked if it wasn't for somebody warning him that it was going to happen. I say somebody because Matthias definitely did not say this fucking line. Sargon and Asher have a fight. It lasts about 10 seconds and it's fine. Like every sexual encounter I've ever had. Sargon calls out for every one of them to be arrested, obviously, because they're breaking the rules. He's not done anything wrong. He's the villain and I'm on his side at this moment in time. But out of nowhere, the king just turns up. The king of the city is just there. And he steps in and he says, no, Asher has got leniency because he's such a good warrior. So to pay off the debt of you basically breaking the law and attacking Sargon here, you have to send your son off to train to become a Black Scorpion. And then the king leaves. Why was the king there? Why? He had he just walks in, delivers a line and leaves. Obviously Sargon doesn't take very kindly to Asher and Matthias being let off. And out of absolutely fucking nowhere, his eyes just turn black. The pacing of this film is ridiculous so far. We are 5 minutes in. What it feels like is they had this list of bullet points that they had to cross off to get to the part of the film they wanted to make. So it's just thing after thing after thing after thing after thing, just to sort of line up all of the pieces ready to get knocked down when the rest of the shit comes in. We cut now to nighttime where we see a plume of ominous black smoke heading towards Matthias and Asher's house. So this guy's got black eyes and black smoke. He's basically a supernatural demon. For some reason, this street we're seeing now is flipped from the last time we saw it. It's meant to be the same street, but it's just the other way around. Matthias is woken up by his mother's screams and runs upstairs to find his father dying. Of scorpions! Shut! So the Scorpion King's father was killed by scorpions. It's like a fan fiction. I'm a bit annoyed I've committed to this now because I don't know how the rest of it's going to go, but shot. Second one's easier. The visual effects team tried their best on this shot, and to be honest, it's not awful. The scorpions aren't tracked perfectly, and there's a bit where Asher's arm moves and one of them disappears, but it's fine. Judging by these shots, however, they did have a fake body that they put what looks like real scorpions on. Why not just use that? That's far more effective than your weird little shot that you put in previously. Also, this shot of his father struggling with the scorpions isn't centered in the frame. And I don't know whether this is an issue with my DVD, or if the people who made the film just didn't care enough. So Matthias obviously knows who's done this. It's the man with the black demon eyes who threatened to kill his dad. You'd think that Matthias might be a bit guilty, that him doing what his dad told him not to do led to his dad getting killed, but that's never brought up again. At this point, the narration says that Matthias vows to master the ways of the warrior. I genuinely thought when I was watching this that it was going to say, he vows to master the ways of the scorpion. It's here that we get a training montage at the legendary camp of the Black Scorpions, aka a bunch of tents in the desert. This scene gives off major I'll make a man out of you vibes as well. At the end of this brief montage, we're introduced to the actor who is going to be playing the young Matthias, and he immediately does the people's eyebrow.
How dare you stand where he stood?
Our teenage Matthias is played by an actor named Michael Capon. No, Capon. I think it's Capon. He does bear a slight resemblance to The Rock, and he isn't the worst actor in the world. Also, he played the Blue Ranger in Power Rangers Time Force, which means he gets a pass from me. Just for being a Power Ranger, you get a pass. Matthias and the rest of the Scorpions return to the big city after completing their training. This establishing shot of the city is the exact same one that was used earlier. I will give the movie credit for this courtyard scene and for taking the time to hire enough actors to fill it. However, the courtyard doesn't look like it's attached to the city at all, and there's also some shots where the city just isn't there. Also, is that a scorpion tattoo? Shut! There's a deleted scene where they talk about this, and they say that it's not a tattoo, it's a brand. But it looks nothing like a brand, so I understand why they may have cut it. But the thing is, I'm actually really sad that it's not in the film, because Matthias' reaction to getting this brand is hilarious.
Ouch.
We're on like shot number 3, and it's 10 minutes into the film. Matthias and his fellow graduates ride a procession through the streets to the cheers of the adoring crowd. Also, check out this horse that is clearly having none of this. The Scorpions dismount and they listen to some random speech by some random guy, and then Matthias links up with his mother and his brother. Let's just take a second to talk about Matthias' family as presented in this movie. So we have his mother, obviously, and then we have his 2 brothers, Noah and Enki. So Noah is the one who turns him in this scene, this guy here. Then Enki, we're told, has left the city to go find his fortune. I naturally assumed here that Enki must have been the name of the brother that we see die in the original Scorpion King film. Like, they're establishing that he had another brother, because in that film, he has a brother. But then when I looked it up, Enki is not the name of that brother, and Enki's never mentioned again in any other Scorpion King media. So why? Why have you added a brother that doesn't turn up? Like, he's not even in this film. I think he's there as a baby, and then he's gone to find his fortune. Where has he gone? Where has he gone?
He's left to find his fortune. He'll be back.
Clearly not. He's not going to be back. Why bother making a brother for him that just disappears and never turns up again? This scene also includes an example of another annoying problem this film has, and that's that sometimes you just can't hear the dialogue. Like, listen to this line that's said by his brother Noah to Matthias.
What did they feed you? Rock stew?
This line is, what did they feed you? Rock stew. Which is obviously him talking about how muscular and buff Matthias now is. Also, it's probably a reference to The Rock. I wouldn't be surprised. But you can barely hear it through the laughter and the breathy dialogue. Just do another take. Like, this isn't even the worst example in the movie of lines that you just can't hear. During this reunion, a grown-up Layla joins in, they flirt a little bit, and there's lots of fake laughter. This happy reunion is interrupted by the return of our villain, Sargon, who, between then and now, has murdered the king and is now in charge of the kingdom. Wow, if only somebody had warned everyone that this man had dark magic and was probably evil. But Sargon lines the Scorpions up again, and he goes down to presumably check the rink. After being reminded who Matthias is and who his father was, Sargon singles him out.
Send him to the palace later. I may have a special assignment for him.
It's like porn acting. It's like porn. It's so bad. Later that day, Matthias arrives at the palace for his private audience with King Sargon. Matthias enters the throne room to see Sargon beating the shit out of someone. Now, Randy Couture finally starts to feel menacing in this role. He finally starts to come across as dangerous. And then he opens his mouth and I'm just laughing again.
You better show me some skills.
Also, if you look over his shoulder, there's a giant scorpion on the wall. I should have drank something lighter than this. Buffalo Trace. This isn't even meant to be shotted, Brad. This is an expensive whiskey. Why are you shotting this? Why don't you shot something cheap? Oh, scorpion time. I hope you're keeping up at home. You better be keeping up at home. We're not even that far into the film. It's fine. There's a lot of scorpions at the start, and there's a few more at the end. And I think there's a bit in the middle where there's not that many scorpions. So I think we're okay. Shot. Now we get even more lines of dialogue that are clearly ripped straight from Pornhub.
Don't just stand there. Come to me.
Don't just stand there. Come to me. That's not a bad impression, that is it? That sounds alright to me. I've had some shots, so I don't know. Sargon catches Matthias looking at the faces of his guards, which all appear to have these markings on. And Sargon explains that each of the markings represents a man that his men have killed. We immediately cut to a man who has 4 markings on his face. In the first movie, The Rock had killed 4 people before we even saw his face on screen. Also, this practice of marking yourself to show a kill never comes up again. It's almost like the writers thought it was cool and then forgot about it. Sargon refers to Matthias here as one of his personal bodyguard. So, the Black Scorpions, are they like bodyguards for hire, but then the best ones get kept to guard the king of Akkad? Because earlier in a speech, it was mentioned that the Scorpions would bring gold to the kingdom, and I don't know whether this is through like pillaging or through being hired for a service, but Matthias later on talks about how his father was the bodyguard of the pharaoh, which means that they obviously do get rented out basically to be bodyguards for other people. But in the Scorpion King, they've got a reputation as assassins. So are the Black Scorpions bodyguards, but then other Akkadians are assassins? Like, did the people who made this even watch the last movie? Sargon has one of his men demonstrate his loyalty by stabbing a knife horizontally through his hand. He's just severed the tendons and shit that control his fingers, right? Like, that guy's nerfed himself. He's useless. He can't move his hand. Sargon asks Matthias if he is capable of this level of loyalty, and Matthias responds with... Was that in the script? Did the script writer put aye? Is this really what people think, like, warriors in ancient times spoke like? Are you loyal, Matthias? Aye! Sargon seems satisfied with this answer, and he dismisses Matthias for the night. The very next scene is Matthias returning to the throne room to prove his loyalty. Why bother splitting this into 2 scenes? It would have worked fine as one. The only reason they did this is so that they could have Matthias go off and have an orgy. So yeah, Matthias meets back up with Sargon and they exchange once more some incredible dialogue.
I hear you're quite the swordsman.
Not quite polished yet, sire, but quick learner, I hope.
I like you, Matthias.
How is this not porn? Sargon asks Matthias to prove his loyalty by killing his own brother, who apparently slandered the king. This is day 1 on the job. Sargon does not fuck around. Matthias instead chooses to save his brother by slashing the chains. He tells his brother to run, but instead his brother does a cute little forward roll directly into danger. Right, finally, we have an action scene. Everybody get ready, it's going to be amazing. Matthias opens the fight with a jazzy slow motion flip. This is the first time that I noticed that Matthias's sword has a fucking scorpion on it. Drink? Oh, it's like that Aliens meme where it's like aliens everywhere. It's like scorpions everywhere. Matthias is a black scorpion, so obviously the standard palace guards aren't going to put up much of a fight. In order to even the odds, Sargon sends in to fight Matthias one of his own personal bodyguards who is also a black scorpion. This guy has marks on his face, clearly indicating he's meant to be a more experienced fighter. He's also carrying a spear, which should give him a ranged advantage, but instead of using this advantage, he walks up to Matthias and immediately gets defeated. This must be doubly embarrassing for him because the movie shows him getting defeated twice. Sargon then sends his second Scorpion bodyguard to deal with Matthias, and this one does actually use his spear correctly. He does, however, immediately get killed by a single slash to the gut within seconds. Honestly, Sargon, you need to do a better job of recruiting bodyguards if they can get killed immediately by the new recruit. So that's it. We had a 30-second fight scene and we're done. Matthias ends this fight scene by sheathing his sword and staring angrily at Sargon. You know, credit where credit's due. I like this. He does look badass. So before we move on from this fight, let's just take a look at the body count. So Matthias has killed 3 palace guards and 1 scorpion. The other scorpion was just knocked out. He gets back up in a bit. That means that in this fight, Matthias has killed 4 people, which is the number of face tattoos on the men that we were shown earlier. So did these men just not fight anyone? Did they just not get into any combat? Also, earlier, when Matthias was asked if he wanted his own scars, like if he wanted to kill people, Matthias said, if they deserve it, yes. You know who definitely deserves to die? 3 palace guards protecting their king and a bodyguard protecting their king from a man who has disobeyed a direct order from the king and freed a prisoner who is guilty of a crime in that kingdom. They definitely deserved it, Matthias. They deserved it, all right. Okay, so kayfabe here. I've got some notes in front of me. I follow the notes. This is what I'm referring to when I'm recording this. And I came up with the idea to do the shots thing in the notes whenever Scorpion was mentioned. I didn't really fathom how many mentions of Scorpion there were at the start. And we're not even that far into the film. I need to keep going. And I'm already like mildly buzzed. I don't drink a lot anymore. My tolerance is low. It's fine. It's fine. I'm a professional. I can make it through. You know what? It's going to be fun. This is the whole point. It's going to be a fun video. You get to enjoy me ranting about this shit film, and we all get to enjoy ourselves. Because that's what people are here for. If you are new to Break Brad, if you only joined the channel and didn't see the previous iterations, the idea of Break Brad is for me to vent my frustrations by ranting about things that bug me, and being in this mildly inebriated mood is perfect for that. Because listen, I'm ranting now about ranting, and it's great. And get ready for more, because the film just gets worse from here. It's so bad. This has taken me over 4 weeks, 5 weeks to write this and to get ready to record it, because I was like, oh, do I have to go back? Do I need to go back to the film and watch more of it? Because it's so intolerably shit. And like, it's funny in a way, but it's also tedious. And let's carry on. Matthias performs what is the most telegraphed spear throw in cinematic history, but Sargon stops it in midair with magic powers. This really threw me off. Like, I know we've seen him doing magic before in this film, but the magic was always a bit more subtle and mysterious. This is just Magneto. Sargon uses his magic force powers to throw the spear back at Matthias, but accidentally spears his own man in the process. Good job, bro. Matthias and his brother leap out of a nearby window and commandeer a horse. Sargon doesn't follow them. What he does instead is he draws a bow, he whispers to it, and then this happens. I literally had to pause the film here when I was first watching it because I was laughing so hard. Like, where's the conflict in this movie when the villain has scorpion-seeking arrows? Like, he can whisper to an arrow and it homes in on his enemies. Why is there any conflict at all? This homing arrow follows Matthias and Noah through the twists and turns of the city, and you won't be surprised here to hear that a lot of these shots are reused. There's this one of the arrow flying towards the camera, this one of the arrow flying away from the camera, this one of a horse crossing an open area of the city. We also get a cameo from the same street that was flipped earlier. Matthias manages to escape the city just as the guards close the door. I don't get why they're going to carry on closing the door. Like, the person they're closing it for just left. Open the door, send people out. Just before the doors close, the homing arrow slips through and it chases Matthias and Noah across the open plains outside of the city. Now, if I'm going to spend time taking the piss out of the bad shots in this film, then I do have to give credit to the good ones. This shot of the arrow following them is pretty decent. The compositing's fine, the composition is fine, and there's like a little glint on the arrow that lets you know how far away from them the arrow is. I guess it's just a bit of a shame then that when Noah gets hit with this arrow, the background instead appears to be woodland with pylons. You didn't think I'd notice that, did you, filmmakers? You didn't think I'd see that, but I went through frame by frame. I fucking saw it. Also, the following shot of the city looks shit, and the mountains have also just disappeared. Once we are away from the city, Matthias holds his brother in his arms as he dies, and he weeps for his fallen familial member. I wish I could give a shit. I wish I could. But we met this guy like twice. He did nothing, and now he's dead. It's also very original for this movie to use a dead brother to try and motivate Matthias. I hope he's got 3 more brothers for the next 3 films. Maybe Enki'll come back. Oh, he doesn't. He's not coming back. This is where the narrator pipes up again after 10 plus minutes of not saying a fucking thing to deliver a line of dialogue that is so pointless. I don't know why it's in the film.
Now, with his brother's blood on his hands, vengeance had branded itself in Matthias's heart.
Vengeance was already in Matthias's heart. That's the whole reason he trained in the first place, to get strong enough to kill Sargon for killing his father. His brother's death doesn't matter. What they should have done in this scene is remove the homing arrow bit. It's shit, it's stupid, don't put it in there. And replaced Noah with Layla, which means that when Matthias escapes, Layla escapes with him. Because in the next scene, she regroups with him anyway. So it would have made more sense to have Layla be in that scene so he could then take her with him, and we don't need the death of the brother to try and motivate him. It would have been so much cleaner. If you need more proof that this brother is completely unnecessary to the plot, I don't think he is ever mentioned again. And like, I went through the film, I looked, I don't think he is ever mentioned again. So at this point, we're about 20 minutes into the film. And so much has already happened, but it also feels like nothing has happened. After Matthias escapes the city, we check in with Sargon, who is using magic to look at an image in a bowl of dark liquid. He's not really helping his case here that he's not a demon from Supernatural, because they do that as well. The image that Sargon sees in this bowl is a sword that is spinning around. We discover later on in the film that this sword that he's looking at is the sword of Damocles. This is a sword that Sargon wants, and he's trying to manipulate Matthias into getting it for him, which is why he tells his guard here not to pursue Matthias. This scene of him looking at this sword, though, is utterly pointless. It literally only exists for the audience to see it. He has no reason to do this. Matthias arrives in a seaside town with streets that look oddly familiar. They literally must have just had the budget to build a single street, because they reuse this same street every time they need to show a street. And it is quite interesting to see how they've managed to stretch what appears to be a single chunk of a set into being used for multiple locations, multiple scenes, multiple angles. It is interesting, it's a good way to work with your budget. However, I wish they'd move the props around a bit more. These pots that hang on the wall, they're there all the time. Just swap them out, put something else on there. While traversing the streets, Matthias realises that he is being followed, so he knocks down his assailant with a definitely real fish. This assailant turns out to be Layla, who's not very happy about being slapped by seafood.
Oh, I hate mackerel.
Next time I'll use tuna.
Okay, I'll admit it, I did chuckle a little bit at that line. Layla explains to Matthias why she's here. She says that she ran away to escape an arranged marriage to a sheep farmer because she would prefer a life of adventure.
I just want a life of adventure. Like a man.
Just one small problem. You're not a man.
Thanks for noticing.
Somebody was actually paid to write this dialogue. Layla mentions that she heard about Matthias trying to kill Sargon, then Layla drops this line out of fucking nowhere.
Everyone knows he makes sacrifices to the dark gods and they've given him black magical powers.
Do they? Do they know this? Everybody knows this. Why am I hearing this randomly from you in the middle of a conversation? Writers, put some fucking effort in. Matthias tells Layla that he doesn't want her coming with him because she's a girl, and that means she'll only get in the way. I don't know why they suddenly decided to make Matthias a massive sexist arsehole in this, but I guess it's so that Layla can prove herself later on. Matthias just leaves Layla and heads to the docks to buy passage to Egypt. During this transaction, we see a tattoo on Matthias' arm that is definitely not a scorpion. It looks like some kind of Celtic tattoo, which I can only assume is a tattoo that Michael Capon has. Layla just follows him and buys passage to Egypt anyway, and then another character appears out of nowhere and drops this line.
To the land of the pharaohs, my good man.
This was the second time I had to pause the film because I was laughing too much. Like, who the fuck is this guy? Who is he? Why is he just turned up and he's dropping lines like he's in a panto? So this character is Aristophanes, who is referred to as Ari for most of this film. He is a Greek poet and playwright. You might recognise his voice because he's the narrator of the film. So the boat gets underway to Egypt, and during the voyage, Matthias and Layla start exchanging some witty remarks. Considering that Matthias is now a wanted man who fled the city because the man who killed his father just murdered his brother, like considering that's the reason he's here, he's very chipper. He doesn't seem to give a toss. Matthias questions Layla on why she's here, and she tells him that she wants to go to Egypt to see the pyramids. Well, you're going to be waiting around for a while, considering that during this time period they don't fucking exist. So Matthias explains what his plan is. He's going to go to Egypt to cash in a favour that the pharaoh owes his father, and he's going to ask for the Spear of Osiris, which is supposedly a legendary artifact able to kill supernatural beings. Anybody who is versed in the lore of this entire franchise will know that the Spear of Osiris is the spear that is used in The Mummy Returns to kill the Scorpion King, like the big CGI scorpion. So this is, I guess, a fun reference. However, Ari interjects here to say that this spear will only work on Egyptian monsters. Instead, Ari suggests that they seek the Sword of Damocles. Now, this film is taking massive liberties with the story of the Sword of Damocles, which is an old fable, a legend, of a time when a man called Damocles said that the job of a king must be easy, it must be a piss easy job. So what the king did is he got Damocles to sit in the throne for a day, and he suspended a sword above his head that was hanging by a single horse's tail hair. And the idea being that even though being a king must be great, you must have riches, you must have everything you want, there is always an impending threat of death, represented by the hanging sword that at any moment could fall and kill you. The film's version of this story, though, just doesn't make any sense, because they say that Damocles was a man who killed his king and was then sentenced to die 1,000 times by the blade that he used to kill the king, and then the blade was magically empowered by Zeus and given to the goddess of the Underworld. Why? Why that blade? Why? The main takeaway from this is that the blade is supposedly able to cut through anything, mortal or immortal. During this exposition scene, a map randomly just fades in and out. This never happens again, ever, and I looked at the map and I can't find what it corresponds to. So it's pointless. Again, another just pointless thing they put in. Considering how much this movie loves telling, not showing, this scene where they hatch the plan is such a mess that it took me an hour to figure out what was actually happening. So I've wrote it out and I've had a few shots. I'm just going to pick up my tablet and read what I've written because I cannot be asked doing multiple takes of this mess. So I'm sorry, but this is how this bit's going to happen. Okay, so the summary of this scene is that Matthias decides to seek out the Sword of Damocles, which in this universe should be able to kill Sargon. Aristophanes says that the sword is in the Underworld. So, we're all with this so far. In order for a mortal to access the Underworld, they have to find a portal within the Minotaur's Labyrinth. So according to Wikipedia, which is the name of the Mummies series wiki, the Labyrinth is beneath King Minos' palace in Knossos, which is a city on Crete, which is an island south of Greece. Okay. Aristophanes does not mention any of these details to Matthias. He only tells Matthias the backstory of the sword, that he can find it in the Underworld, and that he knows where to go. But somehow, Matthias already knows they need to go to Knossos, and as luck would have it, that's where their boat is already going. But wait a minute, I hear you ask. As I've made sure to mention multiple times, the boat they are travelling on is going to Egypt, the land of the pharaohs. All of them bought passage to Egypt. Matthias wants to see the pharaoh, Layla wants to see the pyramids. So maybe it's a stop on the way. So the land, okay, I did a lot of reading into this. It's so stupid. The land that people used to believe belonged to the Akkadians is now modern day Iraq. So let's assume, based on the three locations that we're talking about, so we've got Iraq, we've got Greece, and we've got Egypt, let's assume that where they're sailing is the Mediterranean Sea. Why the fuck is a boat that is sailing to Egypt making a stop at Knossos in Crete? I may have been able to figure out this journey better if the map they'd shown was actually relevant to something. Honestly, this scene is so bloated, but it's missing out so many elements that are crucial to the plot. My theory is that it was actually much longer. It contained more information. And the filmmaker was like, oh, this is boring. Cut it down to the bare minimum.
Damocles' infamous sword was transformed by a lightning bolt from Zeus into a wondrous weapon and presented as a gift to the queen of the underworld. Herodotus himself saw it when he journeyed to that awful abode of the damned via a secret portal located in the labyrinth at King Minos' palace in Knossos.
Oh, please.
Anyway, Ari agrees to take Matthias and Layla to find the sword in return for the exclusive rights to their story and 100 silver staters. The stater is a currency that was used in ancient Greece, but the earliest stamped versions of it come from 650 BC, which is over 2,000 years after this movie. This movie is dripping with historical accuracy. I'm going to be completely honest, up until this scene, I was actually kind of enjoying the unintentional comedy and stupidity of this film, and then this scene happened, and it completely sapped my enthusiasm. Like, it killed the vibe so hard. My disappointment, however, was short-lived, because this is the point where the shit really starts happening. The boat arrives in Knossos, and the trio head towards the palace. Ari starts flirting with Layla, and Matthias steps in to keep his mind on their current objective.
Focus on the task at hand, which is getting us into that. Alive.
Oh, alive, not dead. Thanks for specifying, Matthias. I thought their corpses were going to get dragged in. They wait until nighttime to approach the palace, which is where we get this fucking abysmal establishing shot. It looks like somebody looking at a bad Photoshop through a black veil. So they approach the palace. Ari suggests that Layla try and distract the guards with her feminine wiles, but instead, she just walks up and knocks them the fuck out. This is a good character building moment. But then they ruin it by having Layla just pour a sack of rocks out of her bag. Why was she carrying around a sack of rocks? Was it to use as a weapon? And if so, why pour them out here instead of just keeping them on her? Because she's obviously been carrying them around all day, like they're not a problem for her. Keep your weapon on you, because clearly they're useful. While Ari is attempting to unlock the door to this labyrinth, we get a short action scene, which is, once again, shit. It's just Matthias doing some slow motion twirls in the air, and then every single guard is defeated by him hitting their sword once and then just whacking them. Also, it's really, really shitty of Layla to spend the entire film talking about how great a warrior she is and how she doesn't want to be treated like the men. And then as soon as a situation comes up where she should join in the fight, she just stands off to the side. If only she'd kept her bag of rocks with her. Even going through this scene frame by frame, I cannot figure out the layout of this set, because the camera moves around like it's been held by a fucking Enderman. Also, either that right there is a crew member in the background, or one of the guards needs firing. Finally, Ari manages to open a door in the outer wall, and all three of them pile into a pitch black room. Ari then pulls a random lever where they all fall through a trapdoor into a prison cell. Why is there light coming through the trapdoor from the pitch black room they just left? Even the small details are just wrong. The movie doesn't really explain how we got into this situation, so my assumption is that Ari heard that there was an entrance to the labyrinth, but didn't realise that the door that he was accessing was actually how they throw the prisoners in. I mean, it's lovely, it's really nice when you have to fill in the gaps of a plot for a film because the screenwriters would rather fill it with pointless shit instead. The trio find themselves in a prison cell surrounded by captives. After being unable to communicate with anyone for a while, Ari decides to start asking them questions in random languages, and eventually one of them responds. This man explains that all of them are from different lands and they have been captured to be fed to the Minotaur. This is where Matthias reveals that he doesn't know what a Minotaur is, or that it would even be in the Labyrinth in the first place. So did Ari not tell them anything about this journey at all? He has no reason to keep any information from them. They are his protection, there to make sure that he doesn't die while on this journey, but he hasn't told them anything, and Matthias even points this out.
And you were gonna tell us when?
At the appropriate moment.
Speak up sooner next time. We don't even know who this guy is.
Also, while Ari is explaining all of this to Matthias and Layla, he unfurls a scroll from his bag, but we never see what he's pointing at on the scroll, or the scroll itself. Matthias decides that the only way they're going to progress is to kill the Minotaur, and Layla shows that she's willing to help him by taking off her clothes. For somebody who wants to be taken seriously as a warrior, Layla's choice of armour is very questionable. I don't understand why she's not just wearing the same outfit Matthias is. You know, the one that protects your chest and your belly, the squishy areas that are going to get stabbed. Matthias and Layla head into the labyrinth while Ari stays behind like the coward he is. While they're wandering through the labyrinth, they come across a man who is chained up. Matthias frees him and this man runs away, so Matthias suddenly says, "We need to run quickly," and then runs in the opposite direction to this man. When Layla asks why they aren't following this man, Matthias says the man is out of his mind.
Let's go.
Now!
Shouldn't we be following him?
He's out of his mind.
I do not get this interaction at all. Why is a man who is chained up to be fed to a Minotaur being scared and running away a sign that that man is somehow out of his mind? And why is there urgency from Matthias to run in the opposite direction to the way this man ran? The fact that the man's running that way doesn't mean that that way's a problem. Anyway, Matthias and Layla... fuck it, that's fine. They run round the corner and behind them, the Minotaur appears.
You gotta be kidding me.
I'm genuinely starting to think that a lot of the lines of dialogue in this film were taken straight from a list of cliched movie lines. We now get the Minotaur fight, and everything about this fight is fucking atrocious. The cinematography is abysmal. It looks like the camera operator was given the direction of try and rub the lens on your subject during an earthquake. Somebody literally drops a yo mama joke in the middle of the fight. The annoying thing is that this has the seeds of a very interesting fight, because there's all of these enclosed corridors and then there's a giant beast rampaging through them. And when it actually starts charging down and smashing things around, it's fine. This epic 30-second fight comes to an end when Ari just plays a random piece of music, which causes the Minotaur to stand still, while Matthias charges towards it groaning as he goes, jumps on its back and kills it in one blow. What a legendary foe. This scene was absolutely worth creating a Labyrinth set and a Minotaur costume. Layla was injured during the fight, so Matthias tends to her wounds.
A little higher up, you may have been in trouble.
A little higher up and you might be in trouble.
I'm pretty sure this is one of the only lines of flirty dialogue in the entire film that doesn't feel stupid or forced. So you may have noticed from the clips that during the Minotaur fight, the prisoners who had refused to come with them initially had turned up and tried to help, and some of them have gotten themselves killed. You might be wondering why. Why would they have come to the rescue of Matthias and Layla, etc., etc.? Well, these prisoners owe a debt to Matthias's father. So of all the prisons in all the world, Matthias happens to fall into one full of men who owe his father a debt. Okay. The men agree to help the trio when Ari lies to them about there being loads of treasure in the Underworld. He also lies to that prisoner who was tied up earlier, the one who screamed and ran away, to try and convince him to come along again to the fucking Underworld. Ari is a dickhead. The big gang arrive in this circular chamber, which is supposedly the entrance to the Underworld, and after having a look around, Ari finds some runes on the floor and activates something. We're treated to this really bizarre visual of all of these bricks flying off the wall to reveal that the characters are stood on top of a giant CGI stone pillar in the desert. I'm pretty sure that this is where young Brad turned the film off, because I have a distinct memory of seeing a bunch of people stood on a big pillar and being like, nah, none of this. Honestly, I don't blame young Brad for giving up here. I don't know if this is meant to be accurate to Greek mythology, but it looks and is very stupid. Matthias is looking over the edge at the long drop below him, and then Ari walks over and says something to him that's like, step into your faith. And then we hear Matthias's father saying the same thing.
Matthias, my son, always follow in your faith.
What does this even mean? Why is it suddenly important? Why are they representing it like it's a callback to something said earlier in the film that wasn't said? Matthias steps off this stone pillar and a rock just appears under his foot, and then everybody just awkwardly laughs at this. So Matthias then steps off again and then falls off, but now the pillar's only a foot off the ground. What is even happening? Did the tower shrink? Did everybody else just see the desert just appear next to them? Why bother with the step when he was just going to step off and be on the sand anyway? Why? This is the moment where Ari decides to inform everyone that they can only stay in the Underworld for an hour before they all turn to stone. This is where he decides to tell them, when they are already in the fucking Underworld. Nothing in this film infuriates me more than Ari dropping crucial plot exposition ages after it would have been relevant to know. It is honestly some of the worst writing I have ever seen, of a character just randomly saying, oh, this is a problem, when the problem starts to happen. At this moment, when I was first watching the film, I had concluded that Ari must be a surprise villain. He turns up out of nowhere with the exact information they need on how to get to the fucking Underworld, and then he doesn't give everybody the information until it's too late for them to turn round. He always just looks shifty as fuck as well. He's a moron at best, and a manipulative arsehole at worst. The group start walking in single file across this desert, and we get these lines.
Nice place to visit, but we're all gonna die here.
Why are they finishing each other's sentences? Honestly, I feel like the screenwriters thought this would be cool, but it just looks stupid. While this is happening, we also cut back to Sargon, who is watching them all in his magic bowl. What's Matthias doing in this shot? Why is he waving his arms around? So at this point, the movie is completely off the rails. And I think nothing shows this better than these two shots here, which are about 40 seconds apart. And bear in mind, during this, we don't cut away from the characters. So what actually happened? Well, a forest grew out of the desert. I can also pretty accurately sum up how I was feeling when I was first watching this film by the notes I made during this bit, which were, what the fuck is this? Please just give me a fight scene. So the gang start wandering now through this creepy underworld bog, and Ari stops them to tell them that they have to cover their faces in dust to disguise themselves as the dead. Again, why are you telling them this now and not before they got here? At no point are we, the audience, told where they're going or how they're planning to find the sword. I think we're just supposed to assume that they're trusting the manipulative dickhead to lead them the right way. The annoying thing as well is that scenes like this show the potential the movie could have had. Like, this set is awesome. It's like this underworld creepy bog scene where a lot of the plants and foliage are made of dead bodies. It could have been great. So Pollux, who's one of the random people that's walking around with him at the moment, tells Matthias about the adventures that he went on with Matthias's father and about how the quest for vengeance is a good one, which I think is supposed to play into what the movie's theme is trying to be. The problem is that this theme has been forgotten for the first hour or so of the film. We will get onto what that's meant to be a little bit later when the film tries to force it back down our throats. After a bit of wandering around this swamp, Ari looks at his hourglass and about 3/4 of the sand is already gone. It's been 5 minutes of screen time. There's also a bit here where we get this really weird editing choice, where the camera cuts from a close-up of Ari to a slightly further away shot of Ari to then zoom back into Ari's face and then follow his eyeline. While Matthias is walking, he sees his father looking at him from across the boggy overgrowth. And then Ari runs in and says, no, don't look them in the eye. Once again, information you should have fucking told them earlier. Ari, fuck you. Finally, the characters start to call Ari out on his bullshit. And Ari admits, basically, that he has no idea what he's doing. This is way too late for this team. You've been in the Underworld for about 45 minutes. Instead of trying to explain himself, Ari goes on this weird tangent about this Greek game that he's never played, and then they just carry on like nothing happened. No, hold him accountable! This man has fucked you over. He's kept details from you. Punch him in the face. Throw him in the lake. Also, the music choice here is just weird. So now is the moment where they finally realise that a bunch of the people that they've come with have just disappeared. But Ari says there's no time to go and look for them, we've got to hurry on. Wow, if only somebody who had intel on the Underworld had given it to these men and not just let them wander around aimlessly for 45 minutes getting picked off. Pollux disappears to go and look for his men, and Matthias, Layla, Ari and Fong being the victim that Ari manipulated, all of them arrive at the entrance to the goddess's chamber. As a visual effects artist, I did find it kind of funny that the flame asset that they've used for these torches is the same one, just a few frames shifted so it doesn't look identical. Upon seeing this entrance, Ari chimes in with another stupid line about his stupid fucking game.
Like I was saying, the game gets easier.
I got it.
So let me get this straight. Ari's knowledge of the Underworld comes from a story written by somebody else. And if this is true, why is he so adamant that the Underworld follows the rules of a game that he's never played? I'm getting legitimately angry talking about Ari. He's the worst character. I hate him. He gets even worse. This chamber that they've walked into appears to be a real set, with stone walls and skulls embedded in the walls, and then on the top of the staircase is this like Giger-esque throne with these skulls like made into it. It looks kind of cool. It just shows that they had the potential to do something interesting with this film if the script wasn't so fucking god-awful. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that all of these props and the set and everything had just come from a different film or TV show. This is where we get our first appearance of our secondary antagonist, the Queen of the Underworld. They use a really interesting effect here of these long sash-like bits of fabric floating down. Honestly, considering how bad some of the visual effects in this film are, just wait till the final fight. Oh my god. But considering how bad some of them are, this one's okay. Like, the CGI looks fine, it casts shadows, and they've even done some wire work. The Queen of the Underworld questions how they have violated her inner sanctum. Are you telling me the Queen of the Underworld doesn't know that there's a way into the Underworld and that you can walk from it in less than an hour to where she is? Matthias responds by questioning what the word sanctum means. I know he's not meant to be a genius, but he's not a moron. He must have heard the word sanctum at some point in his life. Ari and Layla start dribbling a bunch of nonsense about why they're there, but the Queen doesn't believe it. She demands that they all kneel, but Matthias refuses. This is where the goddess introduces herself. She says that she is Astarte, goddess of love and war. Considering that this film so far has been playing quite fast and loose with mythology, I decided that I would look up this goddess and see whether or not it was an actual thing, and it turns out the movie got one right. Astarte is in fact a goddess of love and war, among other things. She is also known to be associated with the Underworld and with death, and she was around before the time of this movie. Anybody watching this who's got more of a knowledge of gods and goddesses can obviously let me know what they got wrong, but on a surface level, it's fine. We have finally made it to the worst scene in the entire movie. This scene is so bad that the notes that I have made on it take up a fifth of my entire document of notes. I say now to young Brad, thank fuck you didn't get this far. Oh my god, you dodged a bullet. Seriously, if you think the movie's been bad so far, strap in. So, Astarte reveals that she is a goddess and demands that Matthias kneel before her. Matthias responds with,
There's no reason to get agitated. We can handle this like mature adults.
What in the actual fuck is this line of dialogue? Matthias is acting like he's talking to his neighbour after his dog just shit on a lawn. This is a goddess. You have invaded her land to steal something from her, and you're there like, there's no need to get agitated. We can deal with this like mature adults. In response to this, Astarte drifts across the floor slowly, purring like a cat. I don't know if this is meant to be intimidating or seductive, but all I could think of was Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid, moving your controller with the power of his mind. Astarte leans into Matthias and through random hisses and bad dialogue, tells him that she could destroy him with a wave of her hand. Remember this line, it's very important. She then says that instead of killing him, she could instead seduce him with a single glance and essentially use him as a sex toy. Michael Capon in this scene does a very good job of shifting his expression from defiant to ride me mommy. Then we have the single greatest shot in the entire film. Now, I know I've said that this scene is the worst in the film, but this one shot makes up for the entire scene. Here it is. This is masterful cinematography. The goddess of love beckoning the scorpion stinger out of its protective casing with a waggle of her finger while the love interest looks on in the background in disgust. Do I need to take a shot for referring to his penis as a scorpion stinger? I feel like I should, even if it's just to punish myself for that. Here's to making it through the rest of this scene. Okay, back to the shit stuff. Layla is getting pissed off that a goddess is hitting on her man and says that any woman could seduce Matthias by cinching her bust and pouting her lips. First of all, she's not wrong. Both Capon and the Rock Matthias have been shown to be easily distracted and seduced by women. Maybe, Layla, this isn't somebody you should be pursuing a relationship with. Secondly, oh my fucking god, this is a literal god and you are sassing her. She just said she could destroy people with a wave of her hand. Know your place, mortal! Astarte turns her attention to Layla, now making rattlesnake noises. This woman's got a fucking zoo under her cloak. So I thought here that Astarte was going to seduce Layla, which would make perfect sense. She's the goddess of love, she should be able to seduce everybody. But no, it just turns into a who is more fuckable contest. You know what? Let's play a fun game. I'm going to go through a list of insults that these two characters throw back and forth at each other, and I want you to tell me which one of these is not in the actual film. Are you ready? Astarte calls Layla a man. Layla calls Astarte a dog. Astarte tells Layla she couldn't seduce a beggar if she put gold coins between her thighs. Layla tells Astarte no man would want a 5,000-year-old bag of bones. The fake insult was Layla calls Astarte a dog. The joke was originally going to be that all of them were actually insults, but I cannot for the life of me figure out what this line of dialogue is supposed to be.
If you didn't have a goddess's powers to deceive men's eyes, they'd no doubt run from you screaming. They'd no doubt run from you screaming.
I've listened to this line over 24 times, and the last few words are just a jumble of consonants and hisses. Maybe if I get my DVD out and put the subtitles on, I might be able to see what it is.
If you didn't have a goddess's powers to deceive men's eyes, they'd no doubt run from you screaming.
This whole encounter feels like a character assassination on Layla. What do we know about her so far? She's a strong, capable warrior who resents the fact that women in her society are seen as less than the men, so she runs away and decides to help Matthias on his quest. She's been shown to be quite resourceful and quite confident, although I guess a little bit petulant. In this scene, she goes out of her way to shit-talk a goddess because that goddess is trying to seduce her man. And the way this is framed is like, oh, she's trying to protect Matthias from the seductive ways of the goddess, but it just looks like she's jealous. She's just jealous that someone is hitting on the boy she likes. It was obvious before this that the two of them are supposed to like each other, but Layla is proving in this scene that her life isn't as important as insulting the femininity of the goddess of love because that goddess decided to waggle her fingers in front of Matthias's dick. Astarte tells Layla that she doesn't need the powers of a goddess to beat her and goes for a casual slap which Layla catches and throws away. I know that the line of dialogue about not needing a goddess's powers to defeat her is just to explain why Layla doesn't just turn into a paste on the wall within seconds, but are you telling me that the goddess threw a punch, a slap, so weak that a random woman could just catch it and toss it away like it's nothing? Also, the filmmakers just decided that the 180-degree rule just doesn't apply in this shot, because why would it? We get some more exceptional dialogue.
We'll see who regrets what, you old cradle snatcher.
Finally, another fight. But before we talk about the fight, you must be asking yourself, hang on, where are Matthias, Ari, and Fong? Well, they decided to run away while Layla was mid-roast battle with Astarte. This entire movie, Matthias has been shitting on how competent Layla is, and the moment that she is in trouble, defending him, I might add, he decides, no, I've got to run away and look for my big shiny sword. Fuck her. It's a really good job that Astarte decided not to use her godly powers here. Also, has Astarte not noticed that the other three people who were here have left? Has she not noticed that the prime Akkadian Willy that she was so close to flicking earlier wandered off the moment she looked away? The choreography in this fight is fine. It's not going to win any awards. I'm just happy to see some action in this action movie. Unfortunately, I can't take the fight seriously because these two won't keep their fucking mouths shut. Every single action in this entire fight is accompanied by some strained grunt. And also, they just can't stop shit-talking each other all the way through. Like, we're treated to such classic lines as, I'll tear your face off. Then I won't have to look at you. It doesn't help that we don't actually see these lines of dialogue being delivered, because whenever one of them is said, the camera's pointed at somebody else. Let me show you those two lines I just quoted.
I'll tear your face off. Good. Then I won't have to look at you.
The only explanation I can think of is that they must have recorded these lines after the film and just put them in. Just when the fight feels like it's starting to get off the ground, we cut away again and again, and I wouldn't mind if the other characters were actually doing something interesting, but they're not. They're just wandering around aimlessly. The entire time that we're with anyone else, we can also hear the fight between Layla and Astarte going on in the background. And at various points, you can hear Layla saying the same line, like variations of the same line, over and over again, like she's some kind of video game NPC. We do get to see a bit more of the fight scene in the background of this shot, but it's just the same choreography that we saw 10 seconds ago in a different shot. Ari and Fong managed to find the Sword of Damocles off in one of the alcoves at the side of the cave where the fight's happening. The sword is seen hovering overhead and spinning in a circle, which is obviously meant to be a reference to the original story, but in this version, it makes no sense. Did Astarte do that? Is that how she stores it? Does the sword just reset to its default animation when no one's using it? Admit it, filmmakers, the only reason this is doing it is because it's in the original story. It has nothing to do with your story, you just wanted to put it in there. Ari lifts Fong up to try and grab the sword, even though it's very clear that Fong is stronger than Ari. While all of this is happening, the fight is continuing in the other room. At one point, Layla has her swords knocked out of her hands, but it's so badly shot that I missed this the first time I watched it. Also, there's one point where Layla overpowers the goddess and pins her to the ground, and, well, this is the dialogue. How did somebody write this down on a piece of paper, look at it and go, this is great, and then print that off multiple times, give it to actors who then read it out on stage, being recorded for a movie? How did this then get edited? How did it get past dailies without somebody going, this is shit? How did it get put into a final movie? And then who looked at it and went, this is great, let's burn it onto DVDs and sell it? Astarte decides to do the job of the editor and cut this shit fight short. She levitates Layla into the air and then opens the ground, revealing a pit of fire. Layla gets all confused, saying this isn't fair because Astarte had said no magic. No, she didn't. All she said was that she didn't need a goddess's powers to kill you. You didn't have a formal agreement. You're the tit who decided to start throwing shade at a goddess. You get what you fucking deserve. Also, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but Astarte's robe just appears back on her between shots. I don't know why I'm even pointing out continuity errors when they are the least of this film's problems. Now, I know what everyone's thinking. Brad, this movie is called The Scorpion King 2: Rise of a Warrior, but that warrior has been noticeably absent ever since Astarte tried to rise his warrior. Well, I didn't forget about him. The movie did. Throughout this fight scene, we get a couple of shots of Matthias just stumbling around the caves nearby, accomplishing nothing. He may as well have got a bowl of cereal and sat down and just watched the fight. Anyway, he reappears now that Layla's in trouble and tries to talk the goddess down. Matthias promises to build a temple for Astarte if she lets him leave the underworld alive with his friends. And Matthias says, you have my word on my honour as an Akkadian, and Akkadians always keep their word. No, they don't. You betrayed your king at the start of this, and in the future, you don't kill the sorceress even though you made an oath. You are a liar, sir. We reach another part of the movie now that I had to pause because I was in fits of laughter. Astarte tells Matthias that if he remains in the underworld, he will stay young forever and have the honour of fulfilling her needs. And if he does this, she will let Ari and Fong leave alive. But Layla is not allowed to leave because she decided to call a goddess a cradle-robbing slut. Layla protests with this line.
He'll never agree to that! He loves me! Anyway, one man would willingly want to lay down with you! Ah!
Immortality and being domed by a sexy goddess. I'm pretty sure there'd be a very long line for that. Matthias declines, saying that he made a vow to Shamash to avenge his father's murder. And I know what you're all thinking, who the fuck is Shamash? Back to Google. Shamash was an ancient sun god who was worshipped in Akkad. And interestingly, Shamash's twin sister, Inanna or Ishtar, is considered to be the precursor to Astarte. This proves to me that somebody on the writing team actually did at least a tiny bit of research. The problem with this is that I'm pretty sure that Shamash is not mentioned anywhere else in this entire film, which means that this line about this connection between deities is going to be lost on anybody who isn't knowledgeable on Mesopotamian gods. Also, why are they picking gods from different regions and pantheons? Maybe in this world there's a single set of gods who go by different names depending on the region. Like maybe Inanna is the Akkadian name for the Greek god Astarte. Am I thinking more about this than the writers did? Probably. Astarte claims that she knew Asher and that he is nothing compared to her, but Matthias defiantly calls his father a hero, to which Astarte responds with,
Especially hero, Matthias. And you will find a monster lurking inside.
I feel like this is the theme that the film is trying to go for, because we open with Matthias's father not wanting him to join the Black Scorpions because he doesn't want him to grow up to become a monster, and we know that in Matthias's future he does eventually become a tyrant and a monster. If they had carried this theme throughout the entire film, this idea of there being good men who commit acts of evil, I think it could have been a very interesting thing for them to explore. Instead, we get this line whispered to Matthias about an hour into the movie in a scene that can only be described as a Silent Hill cutscene. It's like a scene out of Silent Hill. The dialogue is delivered like slowly with gaps in between, and then there's this ominous Yamaoka-esque music in the background like permeating the whole scene. Like, watch this and you tell me this doesn't remind you of a scene out of Silent Hill.
You would stay young as long as I decided to keep you. With no duty, see. Now
I know what everyone's thinking at this point. Where the fuck are Ari and Fong? Well, they're still in the cave off to the side, doing the world's shittest human pyramid to try and get the Sword of Damocles. In terms of actual runtime, they've been trying to grab this sword now for 3.5 minutes. Ari can no longer hold up Fong and drops him, but Fong does what can only be described as a levitation, does a magical backflip, springs off the wall, and grabs the sword by the hilt. Matthias decides that this goddess, who claims she has the power to seduce people with a single look, isn't his type, so the goddess reacts by dropping Layla into this pit of fire. Matthias leaps over the hole to save her, and while he's doing this, we hear a random man groaning. It's none of the characters in the scene. I don't have a clue what we're hearing. Ari and Fong emerge from their weekend vacation in the Sword Cave and toss the Sword of Damocles to Matthias, and Ari warns him, "It's sharp." I should fucking hope so. Why are you telling this to a warrior? Is Matthias known for licking sharp objects? Matthias and the gang start running away, and Astarte does nothing. Throughout this entire thing, she's just been stood there, presumably just watching them, and she starts cackling and says something about how she's eventually going to have him. Great. And that's the end of the worst scene in the film. We made it. Well done, everyone. They start on the journey back towards the big stone cigarette. Ari tells them to run back the way they came. Obviously, they're not going to run back a different way. During this sprint back, Pollux reappears out of nowhere and tackles Ari to the ground and starts challenging him on the fact that all of the men are dead and he promised them treasure. I find it really hard not to root for Pollux here because he is completely right. Ari manipulated everybody under false pretenses to come into the Underworld, a place where they are likely to die. Ari didn't give them the information they needed to survive, and he doesn't seem to care at all that everybody is dead. Ari points to a single gemstone on a swamp corpse, and Pollux immediately runs away from his revenge to get the gemstone. How have they created a character so one-dimensional, so devoid of purpose, that he turns away from exacting revenge for his fallen comrades for a single tiny shiny? They may as well replace this man with a magpie. Here we get an incredibly abrupt cut, which isn't easy on the eye, as we cut from the swamp back to the brightly lit desert as all the characters try and stumble their way back onto this stone cylinder. As Ari and Matthias reach the platform, Ari pulls out his sand timer. He initially isn't sure if he's got it the right way up, but I guess there's no point in reshooting that. It's not like a sand timer's orientation matters or anything. Pollux unfortunately doesn't make it and is turned to stone, so now Ari is responsible for 4 deaths. Maybe he can get some cool face tattoos. How do they know that they're safe on this platform? Ari's admitted on multiple occasions that the information that he has from the story that he got it from is very inconsistent. Why is the platform safe, but the sand next to the platform's not? They clearly ran out of budget for the retransition into the Labyrinth because they just sit up and they're there. Yay! Matthias runs his hand along the blade of the sword that can cut through anything. I guess Ari was right earlier to warn him not to touch it. Fong is not happy that he was dragged along on this journey, and you know what? I don't blame him. What I do blame, though, is everyone else for not immediately tying Ari up in a nearby cell and leaving him. He is untrustworthy. Get rid. Back in Akkad, what we all wanted to see, a Randy Couture sex scene. The woman that Sargon is with transforms into Astarte during their tryst. Astarte throws Sargon off her, saying that she is disgusted by him. I'm sorry, but you're the one who decided to materialise under him while he's getting his fuck on. Astarte explains that a young man thirsty for revenge visited her in the Underworld and stole a sword from her. It's been so long in this film that I'd forgotten how bad Randy Couture's line delivery was, but we get this.
I want it back.
And you shall have it, I assure you. Especially if you decrease my powers.
Astarte agrees to this, but first, Sargon must make the ultimate sacrifice, getting a shit tattoo. Compared to some of the visual effects in this movie, this one isn't too bad. It's not tracked perfectly at the end, but nobody's really going to notice that. Also, the tattoo is a scorpion. Shot! Cheers. Our heroes are now on their return journey. This shot of the boat in the water is another reused shot that's been flipped from earlier. It's weird how I seem to have developed a sixth sense for when a shot has clearly been reused. Ari is narrating again, 73 minutes in, when he should really have been used to test the sharpness of the new sword. Fong is also seemingly happy to just go with them, despite the fact that he was tricked into going into literal hell. Even though they are now on a different plane of existence, Layla is still throwing shade at Astarte.
What I said back there for that old battle axe of a goddess.
She better fucking hope she doesn't end up in the underworld when she dies. Layla and Matthias have a conversation now about how Layla told Astarte that Matthias loves her, and this conversation just feels really backwards. Like, she's trying to explain why she said that he loves her, and he's nodding along like, yeah, I know what you're hiding. Like, if it was the other way around, it would make sense. If she'd said that she loves him and he's like, I know. But she's just assuming his feelings and then being like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Ugh. But also, they barely know each other. Like, obviously, they knew each other when they were kids, but they haven't seen each other for years. And now all they've done is go on a little adventure together. They don't love each other. They're just young and horny. It's also a really awkward conversation. Like, it reminds me of the kind of conversations that I used to have when I played with my toys as a kid. I only said that to distract her. That's what I thought. Clever. It was clever, wasn't it? It was. Matthias repeats the line that the goddess said about how scratching the surface of a hero reveals a monster on the inside. Movie, do not try and force a message into yourself now. You haven't earned it. Matthias has not done anything morally ambiguous in this entire movie. You could argue that his thirst for revenge is a pretty monstrous thing, but it's hard to take that seriously as a facet of his personality when he spends the whole movie laughing and joking and dropping one-liners. Back in Akkad, there is panic on the streets as the Black Scorpions appear to be herding people to some unknown fate. Sargon is doing an evil villain speech for a bunch of people, and I feel like I should probably know who they are, but also there's no way they can hear him. He stood talking out of a window when there's chaos in the streets outside. Also, I love how his followers are clearly just as passionate about his speech as he was delivering it.
My kingdom and powers will know no boundaries.
The movie's trying to get to its climax now, so we're just hop, skipping and jumping around. So Matthias and his friends are now back outside the city. It's here that Fong tells them that he has decided that he is going to head home to China. You know, he says that now, in the middle of a desert, at night, after travelling all this way with them. Fong also drops a random line of exposition here about him being an acrobat, which is obviously supposed to explain the weird magical flip he did earlier, but I feel like it's a bit late for that. Ari lies to Fong again to lure him into danger. At this point, Ari is worse than Sargon. He is worse than the villain. Also, apparently this city is called Nippur, Nippur, which I don't think has been mentioned yet. And now they're just suddenly inside the city. How? I can't imagine any of the gates are unguarded, considering what's going on in the city right now. Matthias calls a couple of kids over and he asks them what's going on. And the kids explain that apparently the king has demanded that everybody needs to go to the arena right now. A passing guard sees these kids whispering to a strange man in an alley and does nothing. Like, Matthias isn't even hiding in this shot. But nah, it's probably fine. Well, guards don't get paid enough for that shit. With all this commotion, Layla concludes that something isn't right. You don't say! The gang decide it's best now to split up, so Layla and Fong go to the arena to find out what's going on, and Matthias and Ari go to confront Sargon. Once again, Ari lies to Fong to lure him into danger. I hate his character so much. He is the worst. He's like that kid at school, the one who's like really smarmy and makes shit up and pretends to be really cool, but you just know that he's just shitting his pants on the regular. So Ari and Matthias are approaching the guards very aggressively, and Ari then suggests maybe we should dig a tunnel. Really? You want to dig a tunnel under a fucking castle when there's a time constraint? Everything he's saying right now is pissing me off. The guards step in and try and stop Matthias from storming in, and he swings his new sword and he cuts all of their swords in half. Now, as much shit as I give this movie, I like this shot. I think it's pretty cool. It's a bit daft the guards just stand there and don't do anything, but the actual shot of him swinging and all of the pieces falling off is pretty cool. It's a good way to bypass a fight scene that you don't really want to have, because the guards know that Matthias is not to be fucked with. He can just walk past, and we get this little bit of extra development of like, he's determined, his sword is amazing, he's on his way in. My appreciation for this scene, however, was quite short-lived because the guards barely seem to react to what happens, and one of them reacts so little that he says a line of dialogue without moving his mouth. Anyway, the guards clearly don't want to fight a man with a magic sword, so they let Matthias past. But as he's walking past, we get another line of dialogue that's just been piped in.
I've never seen such a weapon.
This is another moment where I paused it because I was laughing so much. Like, these random lines of dialogue that just get shoved in the background that are clearly not being said by people, but ring out louder than the other noise. It's so funny. Like, whoever decided to do this is a genius because it made my experience better. So Matthias and Ari have entered the palace. Meanwhile, we cut back over to Layla and Fong, who have arrived at the arena, and as like before, the upper half of the arena wall just vanishes between shots. But when Layla and Fong get there, they notice that in the middle of the arena, there is some strange contraption that has been set up, and obviously everybody is being corralled into here for what seems to be some kind of nefarious purpose. But what could it be? A guard stops them as they're walking round, because apparently there's no more room for seating in the place they're trying to get to. I feel like if everybody in the city is being forced into one place to kill them, as we find out in a bit, overcrowding's not really going to be a problem. Layla tells this guard that Fong is there as the entertainment for the crowd, and the guard's just like, yeah, okay, and he lets them past. When he lets them past, there's tons of seating left. A robed man walks out into the arena and starts chanting about how all of these people are to be a gift to the goddess Astarte, and Layla is as astute as ever.
Got a bad feeling about this.
Really? Do you have a bad feeling? You have a bad feeling about everyone in the city being moved into a very small space, and then a weird priest man coming out next to a weird contraption and chanting about how they're all going to be given as some gift to a douche of a goddess you met earlier? Also, I'm not sure when that guard thought that Fong was going to entertain the crowd, considering that that device is set off almost immediately after he lets them through. So here, the big evil plan is revealed. These people are all going to be burned alive as a sacrifice for Astarte. But the way that this plan unfolds is convoluted as fuck. And I'm gonna pick up my thing again because I'm not going to try and remember all this shit. So, in order to set off this contraption that's in the middle of the arena, an archer fires an arrow at the spinny thing on the screw head, which spins down, smashing containers of sand, which pour into bowls, which spins a blade, which cuts a rope, which tips over urns of oil, which pour out at the exact rate to raise the water level just enough to run through the canals in the sand, which spray onto the crowd above, which they then set fire to. First of all, who built this device? Who installed a sprinkler system into an ancient arena? You know what it is? I bet it was Phylos from the other film who installed it because he wanted to shower the athletes and the warriors after they've had their training sessions. And his invention was co-opted for evil, just like all of the other ones. But second of all, why is this necessary? The wall is lined with guards. Just pour the oil off the side and just set fire to it. What are you playing at? While all of this is going on, Matthias has now entered the main keep, and he tells Ari to wait behind while he pushes the power-assisted doors into the throne room. For some reason we get this bizarre camera movement as Matthias walks into the throne room as well. Matthias's father shows up now out of nowhere with the creepiest fucking smile. This scene is weirdly sexual for a father and son reunion. His father approaches him slowly, and he runs his hand delicately along Matthias's sword, which is being held central at dick height. They also break the 180-degree rule in this scene again, and it's very jarring. Matthias now believes that he's speaking to his father, and he asks him about why he was in the Underworld, and his father repeats back to him that line again about scratching a hero. They are trying so hard to make this a theme for the movie when it barely came up in the first hour of the film's runtime. Like, as I said, Matthias has had no moral choices in this film. Nothing has tested his morality. Nothing would make you think he was some kind of monster. This is not an earned theme for the film. While all of this is happening, Ari scampers across the room and ducks underneath a nearby table, and he pulls out a scroll and he starts writing. Okay, I get it. He's supposed to be writing an epic about Matthias' adventure, but are you telling me he can't just watch and remember it and then write it down after it's happened? Is this really the best time to be doodling on a piece of paper? Due to the incredibly poignant message of the movie playing on loop in Matthias' brain, he's caught off guard when the father that he was just flirting with transforms into Sargon. Oh no! Sargon tosses Matthias' sword, and it lands beside the table that Ari is hiding under. If that sword had landed a few feet further away and sliced off Ari's head, I would have given this movie 5 stars immediately. So, here it is. After an hour and 23 minutes of dicking around, we finally have our finale. This end bit here jumps back and forth between Matthias fighting with Sargon and the stuff in the arena. So to make it easier to cover, I'm going to split this into 2 parts and talk about one and then talk about the other. So let's begin with Layla and Fong in the arena. As the crowd is showered in oil, the guards around the top of the wall start lighting their fire arrows. Now I know what you're thinking. Our heroes are too late. There's nothing they can do about this. Well, fortunately, the guards start instead firing unlit arrows into random people. I'm not sure why these specific people needed shooting at, but the mysterious ADR line in the sky says so. Fong and Layla get some short fight scenes here, and you know what? They're actually okay. Although I'm pretty sure the guy that Fong throws a spear at is just a civilian. Like, look here. Guards clearly wearing a uniform, random man in cloak. While all of this is happening, the guards are still lighting their arrows. If only fire spread like fire. There is so much liquid being sprayed on everybody here at the moment. There was nowhere near that much liquid in the actual arena. Although it's very clear from a lot of these shots that they're just being sprayed with water. You know, water, that infamously flammable liquid. Layla instructs Fong to go and stop the archers from firing the arrows. I'm not sure how one man is supposed to stop an entire arena of archers firing arrows, but at the speed they're lighting them, he could probably stop for a coffee break in the middle. One of the archers finally fires a fire arrow at Fong, but he catches it and then uses the force to throw it back. You know what? I'm not completely heartless. That was awesome. Fong is making this movie watchable. I'm not joking about the force, by the way. It's supposed to look like Fong caught the arrow and threw it back, but there's no way that the actor could have physically done that, so they have the arrow fired from off screen, and Fong just waves his hand. Fong then sees that the last of the oil canals has joined up, and he announces that the oil has merged, and then we see all the archers pull back their fire arrows. So, were they waiting for the canals to all meet up in the middle and connect? Like, there's so much oil. Everyone's covered in oil. Why are you waiting? In the wide shot of all of the archers drawing their fire arrows, there's just no oil on the floor. Anyway, finally, the arrows are fired. I guess it's all over. Our heroes didn't manage to save anyone in time. Or that would be what happened if the fire didn't spread in slow motion. So because the fire's spreading so slowly, Layla and Fong jump into the arena and start trying to put out the fire before it can spread too far. But they do this by jumping over the fire several times. Aren't they covered in oil? Aren't they soaked in it? Fong does some really cool shit here though, so I'm gonna let him off. This film should have been about him. Fuck Matthias. Fong King. As impossible as it seems, because it literally is, Layla and Fong managed to power all of the fires before they were able to spread. It's so stupid. Look how fast the fire spreads when the arrows first make contact with the oil. Couldn't the archers just light more arrows and fire them again? The oil is still there. Everyone is covered in oil. Anyway, they save the day. Everyone is alive. And Fong and Layla share what would have been quite an amusing moment if the film didn't cut away before it had a chance to land. Okay, we're near the end. One more big scene to go. The final fight between Matthias and Sargon. Good and evil. Two men who, together, could probably make up a single Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Despite being bigger, stronger, more experienced, and having black magic on his side, Sargon picks up an axe to fight Matthias. I cheered at this. I was happy. He is a villain. He doesn't need to take a risk on Matthias potentially managing to get him. Just be done with it. But then Matthias just calls Sargon a coward, and Sargon drops the axe. What a tit. You deserve whatever's coming to you. While they're talking, we see Ari reach up from under the table and grab one of the swords that is on top of the table. We'll come back to this in a bit. The fighting begins, and yes, as you've probably guessed, it's mediocre choreography with way too many cuts. Why bother hiring an MMA fighter if you're not going to let him show off that he can actually fight? Sargon easily knocks Matthias around and then taunts him, delivering one of the only lines in the entire movie that Randy Couture managed to get a little bit of emotion behind.
You come to avenge your father, the great hero?
Matthias retorts that he is fighting for more than vengeance. He is fighting for what his father believed in. He is fighting for what Sargon has corrupted. When did his father say shit all about what he believed in? All we know about his father is that he did a lot of bad shit, felt bad about it, and then ended up in the Underworld because of it. Matthias decides to wrap himself in a curtain and perform some chiropractic moves on Sargon. I didn't add that sound effect in, that's in the actual movie. Also, the camera is moving around so much here that this is actually disorienting to watch. After a good few seconds of fighting, they stop to chat. Again. Because we wouldn't want too much action in this action movie, would we? In the middle of this conversation, it's revealed that Ari is now holding the sword of Damocles, and Matthias calls out for it, but Ari turns to Sargon and asks for his payment of rubies. Oh, what a fucking surprise! The movie's biggest prick was working for the villain all along. Gobsmacked. Ooh. Sargon reveals that he planned Matthias' entire journey to the Underworld so that he could get his hands on that sword. And that sort of makes sense. Like, Ari did insert himself into the discussion, and he was the one who gave them the intel about the sword and was the one who led them there to get it. But what was Sargon's plan to get the sword from Matthias? Because obviously Matthias was going to bring the sword to him, but how did he know that his guise of pretending to be his dad would work long enough to knock the sword out of his hand? Did he have this planned from before Matthias returned from being trained? Did he know that Matthias would betray him? Did he get his brother on purpose so that Matthias would betray him so that he would then go and look for a sword? And he knew that Matthias would go to the right port town and Ari would, unless Ari was following him? Why am I thinking about this? I'm near the end. I've been recording for 4 hours and I'm fucking done with this film. You know what? I'm looking forward to watching the third one just so I can forget about this heap of shit. I hope the third one is worse. I want the third one to be worse so I can forget all about this one. And people are like, which one's the worst one in the franchise? And I don't have to explain to them why the second one's the worst one because I'm done with it. Fucking Ari, go fuck yourself. You're the worst character in all of anything I've watched. Simon Quarterman, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you were dragged into this film to become the most disgusting, reviled, idiotic, betraying character in all of cinema history. I hate you. Not you personally, the character. Sargon swings the sword to try and cut down Matthias, but Matthias jumps out of the way and the sword shatters on the table. The sword is a fake. Ari switched out the sword for a different one. Movie, you're so clever. You're so smart for doing this. Except, no you're not, because that twist was predictable, shit, and doesn't make sense. You remember when I said earlier there was that shot of Ari reaching up and grabbing a sword off the table? That shot single-handedly ruins what this twist could have been, because we already know that Ari has picked up a second sword. On that note, why does Sargon have a table in his throne room that has an exact replica of the sword of Damocles on it? Also, this means that when Ari stood up and had the sword in his hand, he actually had another sword, the real one, concealed somewhere on his body. Where? Where was that sword? That's not the kind of sword that I'd want to tuck between my butt cheeks. So yeah, Sargon smashes the sword and he realises that it's a fake. This is where Ari bursts back into the room and lightly tosses the sword across the massive room over to Matthias. Okay, so he didn't completely fuck Matthias over, but he still did. He spent the entire movie working for the villain. Just because you have a slight change of heart at the end, that doesn't make up for being a dickhead the entire time. He lied to people, he manipulated people, he brought people in under false pretenses, and he got people killed. He's a dickhead. This doesn't make up for it. It's even worse now because we know he was doing it for money. So Matthias has the sword, and he now just randomly spins it magically in mid-air. I know that the sword has been seen doing this before, but Matthias didn't see that, and we've never seen the sword do this beyond when it was suspended in the Underworld. Are we to assume that Matthias just spent the journey home playing with the sword like a fidget spinner? Sargon tries to talk Matthias down here by saying that he made an oath and he owes his allegiance to his king. You really think that's going to work at this point? You've killed his dad, you've killed his brother, and you've tried to kill him multiple times. Although, to be honest, it should work because, as we know, Akkadians always keep their oaths. Matthias presses the sword against his skin and it burns off his scorpion mark. They're just adding new abilities to this sword every few seconds. Like, Matthias has been walking around with his sword balanced on his shoulder and he touched the blade earlier. So, is this an activated ability? Like, is it now on cooldown? Sargon starts chanting a spell and he slowly starts transforming as he walks backwards into the shadows. Anybody playing at home, get your shots ready. Matthias goes into the dark room to find Sargon, but he is blasted backwards by some magical force. The doorway around the room shatters and out comes a ghost scorpion shot. Oh, Christ. Oh, this fucking floored me. Not only is it another fucking scorpion, but it's an invisible scorpion. There is no way that this decision was made for story reasons. The only reason I can think this happened is that they made the scorpion model for CGI, they looked at it, and it was shit. So they were like, you know what? Let's make it invisible. That's what happened. I will die on that hill. A fucking ghost. Yo, I'm doing a second shot. I'm doing a second shot for the ghost scorpion. Fuck me. To the ghost scorpion. The ghost scorpion breaks off a small piece of wall, and Matthias responds by throwing himself across a room onto a table of fruit. All the fruit is knocked off the table, but the scorpion decides to put all the fruit back on the table because then it'll look cooler when the scorpion breaks it. Honestly, they missed a trick here by not having the scorpion put Matthias through the table as a nice little homage to his future as a WWE champion. All of the carnage causes one of the tapestries to catch fire, and within seconds, the entire curtain rail is ablaze and it falls off the wall. Having this scene back to back with the archers trying to light their arrows for 20 minutes is funny as fuck. Also, have a little look at this shot here of this fire. It looks fake as fuck and it serves no purpose. Why'd you put it in? So Matthias is blasted backwards by some sort of explosion. The scorpion then slashes Matthias across the chest before playfully breaking some of the masonry around him. Not to worry though, because that chest wound heals between shots. Isn't that nice? I think the blood here on his chest is supposed to be this wound, but he has it in the shot before he gets slashed, so I don't know. During this whole scene, we also keep cutting back to Ari, who's hiding behind a pillar, scribbling on his fucking scroll. Matthias appears to be affected by whatever ghost venom the ghost scorpion ghost injected him with, so he's having a timeout while the scorpion just walks around smashing shit. Matthias chooses his moment, and he grabs a jar of oil and he throws it onto the ghost scorpion so we get to see it. And boy, is it a treat! You thought I was being harsh when I said they made it invisible to hide the bad CGI. Look at this! Look at this CGI! Anyway, the scorpion charges at Matthias, it impales itself on his sword, and it dies in what is probably the most abysmal shot in the entire movie. Everything about this shot is crap. The framing is crap. The scorpion looks crap. The animation is crap. The fact that they didn't even bother to roto the scene so the scorpion's leg appeared behind Matthias's sword is crap. Crap, crap, crap. I have spent this whole movie complaining about how brief the fight scenes are, but praise Shamash that this scene is so short. So after all of this, Matthias is leaning against a wall, holding his gut, I don't remember him getting hurt in the gut. Did he pull a muscle fighting? Like, why is he holding this part of his body? Between shots, Sargon transforms back into his human form because I guess the VFX team were too busy drinking to forget they worked on this movie to implement the transition. So Astarte reappears and approaches a still-breathing Sargon. There's a deleted scene here where Astarte speaks to the dying Sargon, which they may as well have just left in. There's not really much point in getting rid of it. Although, to be honest, I think the entire movie should have been a fucking deleted scene. Astarte gets her sword back, and she says to Matthias, "Why should I spare you when you stole my sword and you didn't fuck me?" Matthias responds by saying that she'll have him soon anyway, so I guess Matthias is supposed to be dying here of the scorpion sting? Again? This just makes that scene in the original one pointless, because they make a big point of it, like he'll survive, but the blood of the scorpion will always flow through his veins. It already has. He's already had the blood of the scorpion in his veins for his entire fucking life. This movie just shits all over everything that they established in the first one. Astarte decides that she can't be arsed with her cool ribbon transition, and so just fades out. And then Ari just falls over. I was hoping so much that he'd had a heart attack. Matthias spends 3 days suffering from this venom and then just recovers on his own, which implies that the venom in the original film was more dangerous than the venom of the super-powered black magic scorpion powered by a goddess. Also, I'm sorry to say, but Ari didn't have a heart attack. He's here in this scene. There was a brief moment where I was hoping that Matthias was going to strangle him to death, but it didn't happen. Okay, so final scene of the movie. The Akkadians choose a new king. Layla is saying to Matthias, "It should have been you." And Matthias says, no, it's not my cup of tea. Come on! This movie's set 5,000 years ago. Put some fucking effort into the dialogue. Layla seems disappointed that Matthias didn't want to be king because she wanted to just lay around being waited on in a palace. Despite the fact that her entire arc is that she wants to be a warrior, she says that she would rather now just be waited on in a palace by servants.
I thought you wanted to be a warrior.
Well, I decided I didn't like battles and killing as much as I thought I would.
They put a strong female character into this movie. Her whole arc was that she wanted to break the norms of society. Her only real fight scene in this entire film is her fighting over a man with another woman, and then at the end, she decides that she would rather just fit into the role that society deems for her. I bet a man wrote this script. I would put money on it. Ari closes out the movie with more narration because apparently I'm not allowed 5 minutes without hearing his fucking voice. He talks about how the blood of a warrior and the scorpion's dark venom now course through Matthias's veins. They're not even hiding the fact that they're just stealing from the other movie now. They're just ripping it directly from it. Also, are they implying that the reason why Matthias becomes an evil tyrant in the future is because he's got evil black magic scorpion venom in his veins? The movie ends with Ari telling the audience that Matthias loves killing so much that he just left Layla and wandered out on his own to go and murder more people. What a fantastic way to end this adventure. Throughout the entire movie, our hero is constantly told that a monster lurks beneath. And despite this, he supposedly overcomes this evil. He fights against this tyrannical monster who is in charge of the kingdom, defeats him, gets the girl, and the conclusion of this is that he's like, no, but I like stabbing people though, and he wanders off on his own in the desert to do his own thing. Fuck you, movie. Fuck you. And to top all of this off, the little cherry on the steaming pile of manure that is this film, in the credits, the cast is listed in order of appearance, when it's very clear to anybody who watched any of the film that that isn't the case. The first person that we see on screen is Asher. He's there for the opening narration, but he is below the characters Baldo and Jessup, two people I have no fucking clue who they are. Okay, we're done. Let's sum up The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, with one word. Shit. This movie is so bad that there was literally too much for me to cover. Like, it's taken me 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it is to get the script. Like, it's not a script, it's a list of notes, but to get my notes done, it's taken me 4 or 5 weeks. And I had to keep going in, rewatching bits, cutting bits out, editing bits down, adding new bits in. There's just so little about this movie that is in any way redeemable. Like, the plot is awful. Sometimes it goes too quickly for you to really comprehend what's happening, and then sometimes it just slows down to a crawl. On the surface, it's just a very simple revenge plot, but they somehow managed to make it convoluted and complicated, but also really boring. All the way through, it reminded me of a really badly run RPG campaign. So you get a GM who comes in and he hasn't done a lot of planning. He doesn't really know what's going on. He hasn't come up with an idea of what the actual sessions are going to be about. And then you get a bunch of players who come in who don't know how to roleplay, and all they know from this kind of genre, this setting, is from movies and TV shows. So the plot doesn't really go anywhere, the story has no proper structure, and everyone just throws out cliches and one-liners and random bits of shit dialogue, and it just jumps all over because there's no real structure to any of it. The idea of it being a shit RPG also works with the dialogue as well, because all the characters just feel like they're trying to say something cool or witty or interesting, and none of it gels together and it just feels awkward and forced.
You gotta be kidding me.
Got a bad feeling about this.
And I'm a poet, not a scribe, you jackass.
Maybe we should talk about the action. Well, we can't, because there's so little of it and it's so brief that it's not worth talking about. All of the action seems to happen in spells of 5 or 10 seconds before we cut away to a different scene, or we pause so the characters can just throw shit quips at each other. And there's just so many other things that just add to how shit it is. Like the number of times shots were clearly just reused or flipped, or the number of random lines of dialogue that were recorded after the fact and piped in to try and pad it out because they clearly didn't record enough on set. I will say, I do think it's unfair to just shit on the movie. So, what did I actually like about it? Well, the main three actors, were fine. They weren't bad actors. They probably could have done better if they were given better material. Ari is a dickhead and I hate him, but the actor was okay, and I think they could have done something with him if it wasn't shit. Fong, though, he was perfect. No notes. Fong, you're the man. Randy Couture, though, I just don't know who thought it would be a good idea to cast somebody in that role who can't act. The only thing I can think is that they knew that the absence of The Rock would be felt in this film, and so they wanted to replace him with somebody who could have a similar sort of presence, somebody else who was big and muscular and dangerous. But they didn't utilise Couture for the things that he is good at. They didn't utilise the fact that he's an amazing fighter and he's really stacked and just his presence, it's on its own, is dangerous. They just had him walking around like this, delivering lines that just sound like he's in some kind of porno. He was massively underutilised. He's a bad actor, but he's not an actor. That's not what he should have been there for. He should have been there for some amazing fight scenes. Back to the good stuff though, the set design in the film was generally pretty decent. The swamp set looked really cool. It was very interesting. And the sanctum with the skull throne and the skulls on the side and stuff, that was all fine. Even just the basic sets of the arena and the courtyard and the throne room and stuff, all of that stuff looked great. They had a good team on it. They obviously put some actual effort and passion into making the scenery look good. Amazingly, I'm also going to give a pass to most of the visual effects. You have to bear in mind, this is a made-for-TV movie from 2008. So it's going to look rough. The team aren't going to have had a lot of time or a big budget to put together what they needed to get this thing to look decent. I did make fun of it a lot for looking shit, but I get why it looks shit. And like I said, it wouldn't have mattered so much if the story and the dialogue and that kind of stuff, the stuff that they could control the quality of, if that stuff had been better. The cast and crew also looked like they were having a really good time behind the scenes. If you watch any of the behind the scenes stuff, they're all having a laugh, they're all actually quite proud of what they're doing, despite the final product being awful. The people who worked on it clearly did put a lot of effort in, they tried with what they had, and I have a lot of respect for that. So, you know what, let's do one final shot for the cast and crew who worked on the film. Thank you for giving me a steaming pile of excrement with which to make my video from. Cheers to you. With all of this being said, there is one massive, glaring issue with this movie I haven't quite covered yet, and that is that it doesn't need to exist. It serves no purpose. It doesn't further the lore of the Scorpion King. In fact, all it does is ruin the already established lore that the original film put in place. Like, he's not called the Scorpion King because he had scorpion venom in his veins from that encounter with Memnon. He's now the Scorpion King because he's from a tribe of people called the Scorpions, and they worship scorpions, and he has scorpion tattoos on him, and he had a scorpion sword, and all this bullshit. Also, his people are no longer skilled assassins, they're bodyguards, which is, as I said, a very different thing. The film doesn't answer any of the questions that we would want to know about Matthias from a prequel. Like, what happened to all of his people? Why is he the last of the Akkadians? Who were the two brothers that are walking around with him, and where did they come from? How did he learn to fire a bow with such incredible force? It feels like it wouldn't have been too hard to tie all of this together either. Just give him more brothers, send them away at the start like Enki did, and they can come up later. And then when he goes to the Underworld, have the god be Anubis, because that would explain why he knew to make a deal with Anubis in his future. And then say that the weapon he needs to kill Sargon is the bow, the legendary bow that he uses in the later films. Maybe it can actually be this magical artifact. And when it comes to his people, maybe when he arrives back at the city, he's too late, and Sargon has already massacred everybody, and that's what happened to all of his people. You could argue that the first prequel did exactly the same thing that this one did, which is jump really far back in time and give us a relatively unrecognisable version of the character that we know from the later incarnation. But at least the other film had the courtesy of being good and being entertaining. But the problem is, because this one has now gone further back in time, we now have two giant gaps in the history of the Scorpion King. You have the gap from when he leaves Layla to when we see him at the start of the Scorpion King movie as an assassin walking around, and then we also have the gap from when he becomes the king in whatever the city was called in the other movie to becoming the tyrant. Like, there's now two huge gaps. So all this film has done is create more holes in the story of this character. I guess then it's lucky that we have 3 more movies to fill in the gaps. Yay! You know, I was prepared for shit with this one because I saw it as a child and I knew it was bad. With the next ones, I'm going in completely blind. I have no idea what they're going to be about. Is the next film going to be a sequel to this one? Will Michael Capon come back as Matthias? Will the next one be a sequel to the original one and we finally get to see Matthias ruling as king? Or will they just do another prequel where we go back in time and we see baby Matthias sucking on his scorpion pacifier inside his scorpion crib, looking up at his scorpion mobile, which is being lit by his scorpion nightlight? I guess we'll find out. Oh, this took so long. So there we are, part 2, finally filmed. Holy shit, this took me a long time. Over a month to get the writing done, and then filming this today. It's got to be about 4 or 5 hours of raw footage by this point. It's ridiculous how much I filmed. Hopefully I'm going to be able to edit this down to something that's around about 2 hours. The whole idea of this 5-movie Scorpion King Break Brad series is that I want to get feedback on whether or not this sort of like super in-depth breakdown of the films like this is going to be something that people enjoy watching long term. And depending on what the film is and how much is in it and how bad it is going to depend on how long the videos are. So what I want people to do is I want people to actually tell me in the comments, like I said for this the last one, I'll say it for this one. I want people to go into the comments and I want you to let me know what are the problems with this sort of format and what's good about it. Like, is it too long? Unlike the other Scorpion King film, I went very in-depth with this one because the other one was just a fun romp, whereas this one So much was wrong. And every single time I watched it, I would find something new to talk about or complain about or break down. And I guarantee there's going to be comments where I've completely missed something, where somebody's watched it and been like, how could you not talk about this? Because this film is so dreadful in so many ways that there's just an infinite number of things that you could discuss about how bad it is. So yeah, this is part 2, and there's obviously going to be a part 3, a part 4, and a part 5 as I work my way through the rest of the franchise. As I said, I genuinely have no idea what the other films are about. Like, there's a synopsis on the back of here, but I've not read it. All I can say is that from the box art on this one, this looks like an older Matthias. So I'm guessing that this one is at least a sequel to the original. I'm wondering if the other ones might be better. I feel like the second one might be the worst just because of what they tried to do with it. If they go back to their roots and just tell a story that is a sort of realistic sort of fantasy epic in the past of a warrior fighting people, that's what this franchise will excel at. The magic should be limited. I know that I'm saying this in a franchise where the first films were the Mummy films, which have a lot of magical elements, but they are still grounded in the time period and the magical elements are stacked on top of it. Whereas the film we just watched, The Scorpion King 2, it was all like magic, that the king had magic powers and they travel to get a legendary magical spear and then eventually redirect to get a magical sword by going to the Underworld, and all of the mythology stuff is all real. And so I think if the other ones go with something more grounded, then that'll be better. That'll be better overall. Anyway, this video is already long enough and I don't want to ramble anymore. So like I said, comment section, please. Let me know how you got on with this, whether or not it felt too long, if it was too detailed. And the idea is that I'm going to sort of gradually alter the way that I'm doing these so that hopefully by the time I reach the 5th one, this one will be the established style. This one has already got a few changes in. Like, I'm going to start trying to put chapters in so that people can break them up into shorter sections. So you don't have to watch the whole thing in one go. You can know that you're just going to watch a particular section. And I've also added my little opening credit thing at the start that I've made, a little Brad thing that falls and smashes. I've put that in. There's going to be a lot of gradual changes as we go through. And I'm hoping that by the end of this 5-part series, we'll have reached a standard of how I want the videos to be. However, I am probably going to make 1 or 2 other Break Brad videos on other topics in between all of these, because just watching Scorpion King videos and writing about them is going to take it out of me. And I really want to do some other stuff I want to do, like that horror film I talked about. I want to get that one done. But I don't know whether to save that for Halloween. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, if you're still watching, congratulations for making it this far. It's been a long video. It's been a slog. I've had a rough time. I've nearly finished this. You know, I may as well finish it now. I've had a rough time getting through this. And I'm glad it's done. I'm glad I can finally put an end to having to watch the film for information and just get onto the editing side of it, which is, again, going to take a very long time. I just noticed on the front of this, it's got 5 stars on the bottom. But it doesn't say who has given it the 5-star rating. So imagine if this one is amazing. Imagine if this film is like a hidden gem and it's so good. You know what? I'm looking forward to this one now because it's got 5 stars on the front. And it's definitely not just 5 stars from some random publisher they don't want to mention. It's clearly because this is phenomenal. But thank you for watching this far. And yeah, hopefully I'll read through the comments, I'll reply. Hopefully this one also does okay, or it might be too long, but we'll find out. So here is to you, the audience. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in whatever video I do next, presumably another one of these, but it might also be one of my podcast ones if I decide to release those. I was going to do that when I recorded them all, actually. It's fine. I will see you in the next video. Continue sticking around. Remember, it's okay to be angry. Just don't ruin anyone's life with it. Great motto, Brad.